Washington Free Beacon editor Daniel Halper with us, Real Clear Politics associate editor A.B. Stoddard. You know, statements by their very nature, especially in legal cases or those that are going to be involved legally like this, A.B., tend to be innocuous and kind of vanilla. What are you expecting to hear?
Right. You're right, Neil. They usually come out and sort of give you a bunch of pablum that is not going to be newsworthy, but I think that he's being advised well that coming out and even if he does, like Blake suggested, perhaps take a question or two, it looks like he's forthcoming and he's, you know, Eddie's talking about this and he's willing to answer questions. And I think he said when he left the Hill that he answered all the questions that they had. And so they want to present him as, you know, willing to give as many answers as possible and to be really open about this. I don't know that we're going to hear anything. I would doubt that he takes questions, and I don't know that we're going to hear anything groundbreaking from this. We know what we saw in the statement this morning. He's pretty much denying everything, and he must have gone through everything, obviously carefully with his lawyers before he did that.
You know, Daniel, we already know that all the players in this seem to be lawyering up. You only got press reports, but Charlie Gasparino is pretty reliable on this stuff here. Talks about Donald Trump Jr.'s lawyering up, to include the very lawyer who was responsible for getting Donald Trump Jr.'s remarks to be off camera privately before the committee, much as Jared Kushner's were today. But when so many are doing that, it gets involved at a minimum. How involved do you see this going as the summer, you know, continues on here?
Oh, I think there's no sign of it letting up. I agree. He's probably going to come out in a couple of minutes and reiterate his earlier statement from earlier today, saying that there was no collusion, he did nothing wrong, he just wants to get on with it. And the White House would like nothing more than to get on with it and to move beyond this and to try to do something productive. The problem, as I said, is that there is no sign that this is going to let up. This is really, I think, going to dog them, it looks like, for the rest of the Trump presidency, be that 3.5 or 7.5 more years. And I think
really?
The question...
So you think this goes on for years?
Yeah, sir. I mean,
really?
Maybe 7.5 is too long. I think it will go on for years.
Well,
yes.
If it drags on a few years, then there won't be a 7.5 years, right? I mean, but well, what Mercedes Schlapp, former Bush 43 spokesperson, joining us now. Mercedes, obviously this gets very complicated the more we find out, and maybe unintentional or not, right, of meetings that were missed or not properly described and not vetted and not revealed. So obviously that brings up sort of this talk that what else haven't you told us, blah, blah, blah. And that gets us back to what Dan was saying, could be a multi-year sort of a period of investigations, hearings and the like. That makes it tough to get a lot done in that environment, doesn't it?
It does become difficult when a White House is under investigation. That seems to create, it almost becomes a bit of the priority of the administration. We saw this during the Bush years as well. But here's the reality that we're facing. So you've got the Senate Intelligence Committee. They're having their own investigation in the Senate. What we're also then looking at is the fact of Mueller. Right, the Mueller investigation is key because that is the one that could go into very different areas. We've already seen that Mueller's starting to look into the finances of the Trump world, and so it's where the special counsel really has little to no restrictions as to where they can go.
And that was surprising,
so that
right?
becomes a bigger challenge, I think, for the administration than these almost Senate Intelligence Committee or interviews that they're having with Kushner and with Donald Trump Jr.
You know, I didn't mean to interrupt you there, but, you know, A.B. Stoddard, one of the things that was interesting about looking into the financial dealings is Donald Trump had mentioned in that New York Times interview that he didn't think that it was wise for Mueller to go into his financial activities. And lo and behold, then we get that day, you know, Mueller is going into his financial activities. So the president has already kind of expressed concern about the scope and where Mueller is going. Can you see him firing Mueller?
Well, I can't answer that question, but we know he's telegraphed to his aides and advisors that he might. And inside the West Wing, they are surely considering this as a possibility. So are people on Capitol Hill. So it's
but he would have to know whether he feels it's justified or not that would be nuclear.
We don't know that he really cares about these kinds of outcomes yet, Neil. I mean, he was led to believe that firing Comey would be fine. It was the way that he did it that was so not fine. But we know that he has been warned about Mueller. We definitely know that. But whether or not he really cares is a different thing. I'm sure you saw the reporting out of Axios this weekend that they're preparing for political war that could include the firing of Mueller, and he wants people lined up ready to take the incoming fire and to fight back and stay on offense. So there's really a feeling of panic on Capitol Hill that this is something that really might happen and that he would do it sort of damn the consequences. And that, obviously, you were pointing out, just facing these probes, tweeting about it all the time, that in and of itself is bad for passing an agenda. But if he really lights a fire and tempts his own party to pursue impeachment proceedings, which some of them have told me privately would be their only recourse, and of course they don't want to admit that publicly, I think that's, a very destructive act.
And, Daniel Halper, one other thing that's come up is these reports that the president has looked at the scope of his pardoning power. Now, we're told that includes not only near aides and pre-pardoning them, but all the way up to pardoning himself. Now, hard to say what's true here. It's all leaked out stuff. Might just be all conjecture. But what do you make of that?
I think stepping back, you're 6 months into the presidency. He has a very strong, ambitious agenda that he's trying to get through. It really just distracts from, I think, the main things, right? So we don't know what the truth of the matter is, whether or not he actually has asked his lawyers to look into pardoning himself. But that's what's being discussed now. And every time his lawyers went on TV and his spokesman went on TV over the weekend, they were asked about these questions. And it becomes the topic of conversation. And we're not talking about health care, which is, this should be a big week for health care. Or it should have been, a couple months ago, we should have passed health care. We should have done all these things, right? Instead, we're focused on whether or not these leaks are true or not true. And it's just this massive distraction where really it's hampered the White House and their ability to get things done.
But I would argue, Neil, that when you go out and talk to the grassroots and those who have supported Trump, they're really kind of over the Russian investigation, and they're honing in on figuring out these Republicans better pass health care or else fire the 52 Republican senators. They're sticking with Trump, and they're also concerned that those kitchen table issues as health care as well as reducing taxes and real tax reform, they want to see some accomplishments. And so while the talk in the media world and what would be in New York and Washington, D.C. is about whether the president would talk about pardoning or whether the Russian investigation, the rest of America is looking at this and going, you know what, I want to make sure that I can't get health care for my family. My premiums are skyrocketing. It's a bad situation. Are you people in Washington going to solve this problem? And that's what they're worried about.
That's a very good point. By the way, it could also work the other way, too, for Democrats who we're told now are going from just the party of no and opposing stuff to maybe reading their own internal tracking polls. So that only gets you so far. Democrats outlining a plan now to put the American voter first, the average American worker first, and it's a multi-tiered plan. So obviously they're realizing in the middle of all of this they have to do stuff as well. Guys, I want to thank you all.